and thank you for joining us today. I'm here to tell you all why you were jerks. Think about when you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, and you pull up next to that person at the stoplight a few blocks away, and you're ready to make some choice gestures, and then you look over and, oh, you know that person. You think, oh, I'm such a jerk. Or maybe you're at a restaurant and the wait staff is really, really busy, but it's been 10 minutes and you only asked for an iced tea, so you don't give them a very big tip. And later on you might think, ooh, that was kind of a jerk move. Or on a more serious note, have you ever seen footage of a natural disaster on TV, and in the moment you're really saddened by it? People are losing their homes, their families, but then the next day you've all but forgotten. Human beings have a tendency to react with apathy when they see the suffering of those they don't know. The scariest part is, it's not your fault. I remember when I really got to know my very good friend Christian. We had been going to the same school for 7 years, but he'd always been on my periphery. And the first time we really got to talking was in our senior year calculus class. And right away we just clicked. We became great friends because above all else, we made each other laugh. I can still remember some of the jokes that we shared together. We can't talk about interest without giggling over a joke he once made. And our teacher threatened to move us across the room from one another, but then she said, and I quote, no, because then you'll just talk to each other from across the room. Christian and I got along famously well. But everything wasn't always so simple with Christian. We have one very big difference. I hate confrontation. I can't listen to people argue on the radio. I can't watch presidential debates because they won't stop talking over each other. It just makes me cringe. But Christian loves to argue. He was very good at it. In fact, he argued formally for our high school debate team. And for that debate team, he won a state title in his division of debate. He got a scholarship to go to college to continue the art of argumentation. And we decided we'd keep the good times rolling, and we became roommates in college. It was May 24th, 2011. It was 2 days after an EF5 tornado hit the town of Joplin, Missouri, only 10 minutes from where Christian and I grew up. We were both deeply worried about our family and friends and their well-being, because not only were they potentially in a lot of danger, we couldn't talk to them. The phone lines were all down. So we turned for information to, of all places, Facebook. We were reading first-person accounts, and we were scrolling through pictures that people had taken of the wreckage, and we were sitting in this tiny little dorm room because we were working a summer job at college. And I remember as I was scrolling down very vividly, I encountered a name, and that name wasn't familiar to me. And I turned to Christian, and I said, hey, who's Katie Harper? And he said, I don't know, dude, why? And I said, oh, because she's my friend on Facebook. And as those words tumbled out of my mouth, I remember being struck by the irony of that statement. She's my friend on Facebook, and yet I couldn't remember her. And I felt so callous and self-centered, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And the truth is, nothing was really wrong with me. My brain was working exactly like it's supposed to work. My brain was working exactly like it has been evolved to work. Human beings remember very vividly those closest to us, and we all but forget those who aren't. And I thought, isn't it funny how with Christian, I can remember everything. I can remember the trivial. I could remember things like the jacket that he was wearing when I picked him up from the airport. He was judging an international debate tournament in China at the end of our freshman year. Or I remember the shorts that he wore when we played rugby. We had practiced 3 times a week, but he wore these navy blue and red shorts that were too big for him. So every time we stopped play, he had to constantly pull up his shorts. I remember the jokes that we shared. I remember so much about Christian. I remember when he finally got fed up that I had never seen the ocean. So he took me to see the ocean, and as I'm looking around in astonishment, like, oh my gosh, he kept saying, yeah, dude, that's the ocean. I remember so much about Christian, and yet I couldn't remember Katie Harper at all. There's a biological reason for this disparity. In 1992, Oxford anthropologist Robin Dunbar published a study in which he stated that provided the volume of a neocortex of a primate, he could accurately predict its community size. In other words, if he knew how big the monkey's brain was, he knew how many other monkeys that monkey hung out with. The neocortex is a portion of the brain that, amongst other things, governs our ability to wield compassion and how we interact socially. And by extension of this principle, he estimated that human beings should live in their own communities, and those communities should be about 150 individuals. Now, other individuals on different bases have made different estimations for how big our community should be. Peter Kilworth and H. Russell Bernard estimate this number to be about 290 individuals. But it doesn't matter what number you cite, the conclusion is the same. There is seemingly a very real and biological limit to human compassion. Now, this is just an estimate. I'm not standing here today telling you that you should only have 150 friends and then just cut it off. I'm not standing here telling you that if you have more than 290 friends, you are a fraud. I am here to tell you that it is a biological fact. Eventually, your friends cease to be friends and start to be acquaintances, and eventually your acquaintances cease to be acquaintances and start to be strangers. And outside the tribe, the ugliest of people come out. So how do we get from this to this? It has been a very small 10,000 years since we were living in communities that accurately reflected our brain's cognitive ability to wield compassion. 10,000 years ago, anthropologists estimate that our groups were about 40 to 200 individuals. And now, Tucson proper has over 500,000 people. Every day, when you go out into the public, you see dozens of individuals whom you don't know and about whom you genuinely don't care. That is the reality of it. It's very easy to act with aggression toward these people. And yet it doesn't end there. Our community is now a global one. With the rise of particularly social media, but in general, discourse that takes place over the internet and not face-to-face, it's really easy to be ugly to people you don't know. In fact, earlier this year, a kicker of the Minnesota Vikings, Blair Walsh, missed a field goal that potentially could have sent his team to the next round of the playoffs, and people sent him death threats. And yet, it's honestly pretty easy to turn off the computer and just move on. But there are bigger problems than this. One of the ways that our brain compensates for its inability to care about each and every individual we encounter is through the use of generalization. Generalization is very comforting to us. And to give you an example, someone might say, oh, Americans are very industrious and creative. You know, they put a man on the moon. Okay, there are 300 million of us, and very few of us put a man on the moon. Not all of us are creative. Other people might say, oh, Americans are so rude. But a lot of us aren't rude. Generalizing speech, though, is very comforting because it allows us to make one picture, one person, for a larger group, all the members of which we just personally don't know. But generalizing speech, even positive in nature, is the foundation for larger prejudicial speech. Whenever racist discourse proliferates, it does so via generalization. And yet, this problem still might not be the biggest problem. It's easy to step in when you see hate occurring. It's easy to intercede on the behalf of someone who is obviously being victimized. But there are bigger problems. Systemic violence is yet another result of our neocortical volume. Because we have a limited ability for compassion, neglect is something that we are complicit in. In the Tucson community alone, there are 100,000 people living in poverty, and there are 2,000 people who are currently homeless. These people are suffering all the same, and yet we turn a blind eye to this. So what is there to be done? Our brains aren't evolving anytime soon. The wheels of biological change grind very slowly. And honestly, our brains are almost identical in many ways to the brains of our ancestors 10,000 years ago. And when they saw someone outside of their tribe, they reacted with aggression because it was survival necessity. And now we see people who are suffering, and it's very easy to turn a blind eye. My solution for you today is very simple. create mental and visual tokens. The best way I can express this to you is through an analogy. Let's say you're not motivated to go to the gym. You might post a picture of someone who looks really, really great in the hopes that seeing that person will motivate you to get to the gym so that you can look like that person. Or perhaps you have an old picture of yourself that's not very flattering. You might post that picture and say, I never want to look like that again. I'm going to the gym. My personal token is a picture of Natalie Portman. Because she's very pretty. And I look at her and I think, man, if I go do some squats, maybe one day we'll meet and tokens work in other ways too. It's not just to get you to the gym. Tokens work in many other ways. For instance, when I see somebody who's really inconveniencing me, I think of my mom. My mom, Jeanette, is a really sweet and kind person. She is meek and she is polite and she cares more about her family than anyone I know. She doesn't know how to say no to someone in need, particularly when that person's close to her. But if you go to the store with my mom, you should cancel all your other plans for the day. Particularly if you go to the craft store with her, because she'll walk up and down every aisle and she'll pick up everything. You're like, Mom, you gonna buy that? She's like, no, I just like to look. And it is infuriating. But I would never yell at my mom. That would be so trivial. That would be so insane to get that upset at her over something so simple. When I see someone struggling, suffering, without the means to provide for their family, struggling to make ends meet, I think of my brother, Dustin. It's important for you guys to know, Dustin and I don't very well get along. I think that he's quick to anger. I think that as much as I dislike confrontation, he might like confrontation. I think that he has to be the center of attention. But Dustin is a truly special person. And in the truest sense of the word, he is an altruist. There he is pictured with his family. Dustin's a pre-kindergarten special education teacher. And needless to say, every day he exercises patience in amounts that I will never know. Dustin has enhanced the lives of people living in rural Kansas when other people may have forgotten them. But maybe bigger than that is Dustin's contribution as a father. In this picture, you can see him here with 2 adults and 3 children. The child furthest on the left is the biological child of my brother. And then the 2 smaller children, well, okay, the one in the middle is smaller, that's Daisy down there. Those are his adopted children. Dustin cares so deeply about children that when Daisy and Alex's mother was deemed unfit to parent by the state of Kansas, he didn't just give his time. He gave part of his life to them. He adopted them, and now Daisy and Alex will never have to wonder whether or not they're going to have food or clothing. Daisy and Alex will never have to wonder if Santa Claus is going to bring Christmas presents. Daisy and Alex will never have to wonder whether or not they'll get a new baseball bat when softball season rolls around for Daisy. But most importantly, Daisy and Alex are never going to have to wonder whether or not they are loved. Dustin has made an irreversible change in their lives. And of course, when someone's argumentative, how could I write them off and not give them my attention when I think of my good friend Christian? All the good memories that he's given me, the advice he's given me, the way that he's ameliorated my life. If I would have just said, this guy's too argumentative, I don't want to be around him, and hadn't gotten to know him personally, I would have missed out on all of that. My advice to you today is this. Create tokens. Put a picture of a face you care about to a person whose face you don't know. When you do that, it's very easy to wield compassion and kindness and love. It's kind of like a Natalie Portman that helps you exercise via kindness instead of squats. We are at a crossroad. Our communities keep getting larger and larger. And our brains, they might be too, but much, much more slowly. It is going to be very difficult to be kind to everyone around you. But that's okay. If you put a face you care about to a face you don't know, you can do this. In a way, you can hack your brain. Somewhere, probably in Missouri right now, is Katie Harper. I've forgotten about her. She's probably forgotten about me. And if we were to encounter one another, we'd probably think, oh, that person looks really familiar. And our eyes would narrow. We'd probably go on about our business. And I don't know her life, and she doesn't know mine. Having forgotten Katie Harper doesn't make me a bad human being. It makes me a human being. And in my opinion, how we interact now as perfect strangers is a larger testament to who we are as people than how we treat those closest to us. Thank you.